Oh, what an amazing week it has been. Walking around, your chest is lifted a little bit higher. Your chin is in the air. There is nothing like starting the season off 1-0 with an emphatic win over the San Francisco 49ers. And I know a lot of people want to make excuses about the rain. This was happening because apparently I didn't get this nuance watching the game on Sunday, but apparently the 49ers were the only team playing in the rain. No, the Bears had a dome somehow. I don't know if they were playing with CGI or something, but apparently the rain did not bother. Justin Fields is not a good quarterback. Nothing about declaration about the rain. Hey, for the rain, Justin Fields threw a couple of touchdown passes in the rain, but for Trey Lance, every excuse is coming out of the book. But listen, excuses are in the past. We're looking forward. And Sammy, let's start the show.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Ray.
Trying to cut it back. Justin Fields making magic happen. There goes Fields. Touchdown.
The sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
Hello, everybody. It is Packers week. You cannot help but feel the excitement in the air, no matter where you are. If you're in California, if you're in Florida, or even if you're in Chicago, which, by the way, WCKG AM 1530 is the Chicago home of the Sick Podcast. Every Friday, we are on the air 2 to 3 p.m. Central. And, of course, followed immediately by Olin Kreutz and Jason McKee, a cover two of Bears coverage like no other. That's AM 1530 WCKG. Maybe you're listening to us right now on that station. And, of course, we do have a podcast that we do every week, Tuesday nights, Take It to the Rank, 8 p.m. Eastern. Carmen Vitale joins us as our co-host. And, of course, if you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook, please comment using the word sick to let us know that you're enjoying the show. And we've got a great one here. Listen, it is Packers week. So, of course, we're going to be having the most prominent Packers voice in the world. Tom Grossi is going to be joining us here in just a matter of moments. And, of course, we'll be taking a trip to Fantasy Island. Samantha Praviti will be joining us, going over some of the hot topics in the world of fantasy football. I know a lot of you started 0-1, and you're concerned about CeeDee Lamb and Allen Robinson and some of these other guys. But listen, we're going to get to the bottom of a lot of those issues. Perhaps stream a quarterback if you're missing out on Dak Prescott, if you're worried about Tom Brady this week. But look, fantasy is not my primary concern. What concerns me is the Green Bay Packers. And it is time now for Rank's Rival. Oh, and he's a rival in team only. He is one of the most delightful people in all of sports. His Packcast is a must listen, whether you like the Packers or not. If you do not like my next guest, I feel like there's something wrong with you. Please welcome to the show, Tom Grossi of the Grossi Posse. And what is happening? What are you doing?
I didn't know what was going on. No, this is not a voodoo doll of the Bears. No, Hey, Adam, thanks so much for having me, buddy. Really appreciate being on the show. Always a pleasure. Glad that you got that one Justin Field highlight for the audio, for the intro. It's good. Thanks for having me, buddy.
You know, actually, there's a lot of highlights. I don't want to dwell too much on what happened last week, but we have a photo, Sammy. Let's just a little juxtaposition of what happened on. So there's Justin Fields, king of the world.
Do we have a photo, Sammy? It's just listen, I spent 8 hours making this photo for this one moment. This is why I have to come out guns blazing, because you already have a graphics team that is already ready, and they're like, oh, we've been creating this for weeks.
You know what? I haven't been sitting there at every opportunity, every show on the NFL Network at some point this week has pulled out the Rodgers "I own you" bit of of course, Eddie Jackson is on the Total Access on Wednesday night perhaps, and he, of course, they have to keep hearing it, and for good reason. You know, the Packers have done very well. Listen, the Packers have done very well, but it also is worth pointing out that for the longest time, we had Brett Favre owning owning the Bears, much like he owned a gymnasium in Mississippi, but he's owned the Bears for a long time. And then they hired Lovie Smith.
Yeah.
And the tables turned. And I think a lot of Bears fans are feeling optimistic about what Matt Eberflus has done. And last week, I know that was in the rain and everything. As a non-objective observer, what did you think? At least you hate the 49ers. What did you think of last week's game against the Bears? I just want to know what sincerely what you thought.
Okay, so here's the thing. Because there was a lot of thoughts because for once I was actually able to sit down and like watch the 1:00 games over on the East Coast and just seeing the condition of Soldier Field, like the lines being wonky. I know they fixed it before game time, and just like the soup that they were playing in. I had a banger of a tweet saying both fields are looking terrible in Chicago, which just did very well, capitalize the fields out of respect. But I will say the defense looked great in terms of the Bears. And then Justin Fields, I know the word that's being thrown out this week is resilient. He played well in that fourth quarter. I mean, he wound up throwing 2 touchdowns. And I know you mentioned it in the cold open. You know, Trey Lance didn't really step up it. Their O-line also struggled a bit. But, you know, listen, I think a lot of people said on the NFL website, they ranked the Bears 32, Adam. 32. And I thought that was a little too high. But I honestly thought that they weren't going to be the worst team in the league this year. I thought they were going to be bad, but I didn't think they were going to be the worst one. So I think they maybe shut some people up for a minute. Maybe. A
little bit, yeah. You know what? I had pointed out I'm like, hey, in a world where the Seahawks exist, and of course the Seahawks go out and win.
And then they win.
Where the Falcons exist and the Falcons go out to a huge lead on New Orleans. I'm like, maybe we are the worst. But the Jets are terrible though. And the man who does the power rankings for the NFL.com, Dan Hanses, is a Jets fan. And I will tell you this, that there is I know he will never admit it publicly, but in a weird way, I know a lot of people know the backstory, but I'm also an Angels fan. And of course, there's a rivalry between Ohtani and Aaron Judge. So I feel like the Bears were harshly judged because I'm also an Ohtani fan. And the Bears fans come out of you know this better than anybody. Like the Bears fans will not we let nothing slide. Like there's always like, what did that guy say? What did it like? At least you're a prominent figure. I'm talking about the curtain jerkers of Packers Twitter. Like not even Bukowski or whoever that guy is. Like the dregs, the guys who are in the dark matches with 13 followers. Who cares what that guy made a joke? Who cares? Nobody saw it. But no, Bears fans, Ill Will, and the rest of us, we're like Berlissimo. We're like, oh, we're on it. What did you say? And we want to throw
bookmarking these tweets, and they're just like, hey, you remember what you said back in 2006? Well, here we are right now. I mean, listen, I'm just happy that the Bears, they had their Super Bowl last week. You know, this was a big deal for them. And now, you know, things should go back to the status quo, because for the Packers, it was status quo. Got blown out in week 1, as now has been tradition. I'm not a big fan of this tradition, but you know, we just got keep on moving.
It's like Bernie Brewer just sliding down. You got Bernie Brewer. You got I know you called it our Super Bowl. I would like to refer to it as our NFC Championship game. And I know that would have looked a little odd to you because we actually won it. But I just want to say, like, this might be our Super Bowl.
Which one did? Oh, I'm sorry. I got confused with where we're talking about the 2010 season, that NFC Championship game. I forgot. Never mind. I just got lost. That's me. I'm sorry. That was unprofessional. Yeah, you know what? Yes, that's your NFC Championship game, which then last week would be our NFC Championship game too. So
which you lost. That's why I know you could have been like.
That's what.
By the way,
sense. Yeah,
I don't like the Packers. Number one, and now I didn't think I could hate you more, but the fact that you gave false hope to the Vikings is really like that's kind of taken a little wind out of my sail.
That's on me. That's on me. Yeah,
that was completely your fault. Again, last year you get blown out against the Saints in Jacksonville. However that works. I know there was a hurricane, but I know it's easy to be like, hey, you know, like it's a tradition or anything like that. Yeah. Is there more concern this year? Because I remember last year I was like, I'm not buying into this. Like, you're not sucking me into this one.
Yeah.
Now people are like, hey, there's injuries. There's no Devontae Adams. Does this one feel different to you?
It honestly doesn't. I mean, I think it has more weight because it's against a division rival. So like that game later down the line might matter a little bit more, even though with the Saints, it was still like within the conference. I think the thing is, There's injuries, but Quay Walker seems fine, so that's okay. Chris Barnes, he messed up, but he shouldn't be out for the entire season. And I think a lot of it is going to be obviously the inexperience of the receivers that we're talking about. But the biggest one is, at least for me, there's some optimism because once at least Jenkins comes back, that offensive line gets a lot better. And then so Rodgers doesn't have to rush those throws. And then if we get Bakhtiari back, and I'm going to use if at this point because it's been 2 years, I think that this team looks a lot better. And I think that the biggest thing for me, then I really talked about this on Sunday, if there's one concern that I have about the Matt LaFleur Green Bay Packers, and other pundits have picked up on this, it's something I've been saying for a little bit. Once they get hit, they get knocked out of their game plan, the Packers are not really a comeback team under Matt LaFleur. That's my concern. Because once you start to have things not go well, you get away from the run game, which was the best thing that we had going about that offense. Hell, A.J. Dillon was our leading receiver this past Sunday. But it makes it seem like, the game's already over. It happened with the Mercedes Lewis fumble during the divisional round against the 49ers. They were rocking. They fumbled. They did not look the same the entire rest of the game. You look at it last year against the Saints. That happens. It just seems that every time you go down by 10, 14 points, there's kind of oh crap, I don't know if we're going to come back from this. That would be my concern.
And it's weird with Aaron Rodgers. You would think that they are never out of a game because of him. I don't know why though. Then you always rally against the Bears. That's the one. That's the one time it doesn't. You guys could be down 40.
It's true.
And I'll never be sitting comfortable.
It's the fourth quarter, and you're just there's too much time left. I think obviously the Lions, we were able to kind of bounce back a little bit. The Bears, there was one game last year where you guys came out of the gate pretty hot, and we were able to. But it seems like when it happens early and you go down early, there just seems to be a loss of fight, and I don't know if that's just being lack of prepared, and it is just week 1. So I don't think there should be anybody who's panicking out there, but I do have some optimism for once we get some of those key pieces of the offensive line back, that things should go back to being a little bit normal for the Packers.
Yeah, especially with Jenkins. Bakhtiari, I feel is a luxury. If you get anything, it's so hard. It's not like playing Madden and you just put him in there he's back at 99. It's going to take him some time to get, but Jenkins is good. I always try to tell Bears fans, this team is good. I'm actually trying to tell it to Vikings fans. I'm you guys, you had a nice one. Enough already. You're okay. You know what though? I really think though that the Packers, as much as I hate to give them credit, I think that they're really well suited. Once again, I think the defense, despite what happened on Sunday, is going to be very good. The running game is what is the most impressive thing to me. You mentioned A.J. Dillon leading the team in rushing, leading the team in receiving. I didn't like that from a fantasy perspective because I have a lot of Aaron Jones. Although at the end of the summer when I was doing drafts and we started getting the price of Aaron Jones too high, I was listen, shift to A.J. Dillon. He's going to be fantastic. Do you think that we're going to see that? And I know that Rodgers doesn't throw the ball as much as people think, but do you think that this team's identity is going to be through the run game?
I think even the interview that they just did, Rodgers was talking about, we need to get them the ball more. And I think that while you're going to have these guys go through these growing pains, meaning our young receivers, you have a run game of thunder and lightning that you can rely on, right? You have the 1-2 guys right back there. So I think it's going to be a matter of that's what you lead off with. And if that's successful, great, you lean on that. If it's not successful, that's when you start to go back to the run and a little bit more balance. But I think, to your point, you talked about the defense, that not even the offense, the defense was the most disappointing thing for me this past Sunday because I know I hyped them to the moon. I was talking top 10, potentially top 5. And I think that that's still very, very possible. But that was the most disappointing thing. The fact that you're allowing Justin Jefferson to have a career high day and just torch your team, and talking about adjustments, it just seems like that there weren't many. So that would be my main concern. But for identity, I think you're going to see a more balanced offense because there's not a number one guy that you're going to constantly just be able to dump the ball off to.
Yeah. Could we ever see him do the Mac Jones and Buffalo thing? Let's have Aaron Rodgers just throw it 3 times.
3 times. That's it. Yeah, fantasy owners would love that. I don't think you're going to get that far because I think, Matt LaFleur also knows that he does have Aaron Rodgers under center. So I think while he's there, you utilize him, But I think that you're just what you saw in week 1. And I think what you're going to see, honestly, a couple times throughout the season are those growing pains and those nuances. You had Matt LaFleur, his first year we came in, they went to the NFC Championship game, but I don't know any Packers fan that will tell you that they didn't overachieve that year, right? They got blown out by the 49ers, and they were adjusting. Things were awkward. They had some really bad games. And then in 2020, they hit their groove. Everything's looking fantastic, and he really kind of came on his own. I think you're going to see just, again, it's another shift in 2022, maybe not with, the play calling, but more the play style. That it's not like, hey, Devontae Adams is going to bail me out, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing because Rodgers was constantly trying to do that when he got desperate of, hey, I don't care if he's double covered. I'm just going to bomb it to him, even though you have Allen Lazard, running across the middle of the field.
Yeah, what's up with Allen Lazard? Is he going to be back and healthy and ready to go? Like who eventually steps up amongst the wide receivers? I know that Christian Watson had an unfortunate drop on the first play. Romeo Doubs didn't quite. I mean, he was great. He's a good player. I like him.
Yeah.
He's actually a nice guy. I hate how nice he is. Like he's a legitimately nice person.
His story is amazing. Yeah.
Oh, he's like, I met both of those rookie wide receivers at the rookie premiere at the Coliseum over the summer. And I'm like, I don't like how much I like both of you. It really was bumming me out. I have a photo with both of them. I'm like, I'll take a photo with them. I had not met Velus Jones yet. And I'm like, if Velus Jones is not cool, thankfully Velus also, who's a friend of the show. He's great too. So it's like, okay, cool. These are nice guys. So I don't feel too bad about it, but who eventually steps up? I say this selfishly from fantasy reasons, but who is that? Like somebody has to step up. There's not anybody on that roster last year, any wide receiver who had over 600 yards. Who is eventually the guy?
Yeah. Real quick, before I answer that, I just wanted to ask, when you met Velus Jones Jr., did you both get dinner at like 4:30 in the afternoon? Just because like, I know.
No, I'm sorry.
His bedtime's probably a little later. Yeah.
Just because Velus can go rent a car doesn't mean that he's any less worthy of your guys. So chill out.
It's very true. To answer this, so I've done like I've talked about this a number of times. I did a whole video on this, and I think you're going to see Allen Lazard probably be that guy, but I don't think he's going to have. I honestly would be surprised if he had 1,000-yard season. I think you're going to look at him like 800 yards, and then there's going to be a bunch of guys who have like 500, maybe 600, 450. And I think some of the guys are going to step up, and this is why I loved him so much in fantasy, is Aaron Jones, because that guy can catch too. And so I think that, you're going to utilize the running backs in a whole lot of different passing opportunities. I think Robert Tonyan could potentially come back and make like a big push there. And then my guy that I've been saying all summer, even before the preseason, was probably going to be Romeo Doubs. And that's nothing against Christian Watson. That doesn't even have anything to do with his injury. It just looks at the volume that he got in college. He was a guy who was just thrown to a lot. And Christian Watson, while their passing game was not great, he made the most of their opportunities, and like he was all over the field and had those big explosive plays. Romeo Doubs was like, hey, like you can throw him, something behind the line and he'll be able to scamper for 4 to 5 yards. So I think like target wise, you might see Romeo as the season progresses be one of the main targets, or at least have a good chunk of it. But I think Lazard should still lead with probably around like 800 yards.
And obviously there was the viral video of Aaron Rodgers being upset with his wide receivers.
Yeah.
Is too much made of that. I mean, personally, like I like it. Like I love watching Aaron Rodgers be frustrated. It's good to have a new GIF to now have that we can pull up, when we're trying to troll you guys.
Of course.
But it's too much made of that. It feels overblown, but how do you feel about that?
Yes. I also think that there is a lack of coverage on like what he said. I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, where he was saying like these receivers, like they want to get better. They want to work. And he's like, and I'm going to do everything I can to get them to that point. Like he took that ownership of saying like, I'm going to be the guy who makes sure that they get to where they need to go. And I think like, if you haven't watched Aaron Rodgers and kind of understood at least some of that competitive mentality at this point, like he wants to win. And listen, he did not look great on Sunday. The onus is there's definitely some blame to go around there, with the O-line, the inexperience, all that great stuff. But yeah, I think it's way overblown because especially after last season and all the podcasts that he went on and all of the comments that he made, I feel like if you didn't like Aaron Rodgers before this, he gave you all the ammunition to continue to not like him. So I think that if he's going to say something, like even the wide receiver comment that was made during like training camp and stuff like that, I think that was overblown because he had Randall Cobb out there basically saying like, hey, they need to adjust to us, because like we've been in this system. They're the new guys. I think that's on every football team, but because Aaron Rodgers says it, it's going to get a little bit more heat.
Yeah. You know what? And I don't want to be political about this, but the one thing that really, whenever you think of Aaron Rodgers and what he was doing last year, again, not to get political, but the thing that always stands out to me is that he was wearing a Star Wars Episode 9 sweatshirt. Yes, and I think that that's something that you can't come back from.
No, that is the most egregious thing he's ever done. That's accurate. That is 100% accurate.
That was too much. It was like, I don't know. Like I've met Aaron Rodgers before and it was like, okay, it wasn't rude to me. He knew who I was. He knew I was a Bears fan and he played along. Yeah. But when I saw that Episode 9 sweatshirt, I'm like, no. This is too fun.
Unforgivable. Yeah, like there's no one who goes around and is like, yeah, Rise of Skywalker is my favorite movie. No one.
That was the first time Murray's ever said it. Like you just uttered that for the first time.
Your shirt was a CM Punk shirt. I really thought for a hot second because I looked at it quickly and I was like, oh, okay. Like you got, right now taking some heat with that. And it's like, because I have some CM Punk stuff. I'm like, I don't really know if I want to wear it right now.
There's a Young Bucks t-shirt right here.
There you go.
The Young Bucks are there floating RBG. So
I'll be at Grand Slam on Wednesday.
Listen,
it's in my neck of the woods. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, in terms of that is, some things just can't be forgiven. Whether you talk about, his vaccine status, his views, political views, all that stuff, and there could be some discourse there.
Right.
And I haven't even rewatched it since I saw it in theaters, Episode 9, because it was that abysmal. I've never sat home alone in my darkest hour and go, you know what? I'm going to rewatch Episode 9. There would have to be a lot to happen in my life for me to get to that kind of low, to even just want to view it again, let alone represent it on any part of my body.
I told my kids that movie does not exist. They never made it. They never finished this thing. So,
it's crazy how they just left that sequel trilogy just open like that. Yeah,
it's just a twofer. But I'm curious though, and again, I really want your honest opinion. I think that this Bears team is now. It's weird watching a game and being the team that's actually the most disciplined. Like you heard them. Like, we're not the ones committing the dumb penalties. Yeah. We're not the ones making mistakes. And Nick Bosa can go out there and complain all he wants. It's like, bro, you grabbed the face mask. What did you think? Like the Bears are obviously not more talented than the Packers at this point. But is there something about it that you're like, yeah, this team feels a little bit different?
So it's funny because if you look around the division, there's a lot of new, right? That's going on with a lot of teams. The Packers are kind of like the mainstead. You kind of look at that window and you're like, okay, it's not closed, but like it's definitely close, at least on the Aaron Rodgers era, right? So there's that. You look at the Lions, and if there's a team that I'm afraid of the most in the next 5 to 7 seasons, it's going to be the Detroit Lions. And the reason being is because their team is young. They're building it patiently. I think Dan Campbell is that guy to bring that team there. So many former players on that coaching staff, and they're kind of just letting Campbell run that squad. And I think that that's perfect of what they need to do. They get a franchise QB, they're going to be problematic. So you have them, right? You have the Vikings, who there's some nuance there too. Obviously, new GM, new head coach. I think now that you have an offensive-minded head coach, I think Zimmer kind of went the way of McCarthy, in which just overextended his stay. Like teams were kind of just in the 21st century. He just wasn't focused on the defense when he had some of the best offensive weapons, not only in the division, but in the freaking NFL. You have Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and Dalvin Cook, and you're not putting up 35 points a game. And I don't know what we're doing here.
Inexcusable.
It is, truly. So I think that, Kirk Cousins, we'll see how long that is going to go on for. I think that's going to be limited. But I think that they have the potential to be in that conversation of being a good team. The Bears are in this weird position right now because you had a Matt Nagy run team, and he did run them. It was just into the ground. And Ryan Pace is no longer there, which I think, again, is good for the organization. But they're kind of in this weird limbo in which they obviously trade away Khalil Mack. Next season, they have a crap ton of money in cap space. Like they can go and pull a Jacksonville Jaguars and they can overpay guys like Christian Kirk, all they want, all the live long day. But they're in this weird position where you still have guys like David Montgomery, who are great, Darnell Mooney, who's fantastic. The O-line is very, very young, and so they're inexperienced. You're looking at guys like Tevin Jenkins, and you're like, I don't know if he's going to be a mainstay here like we want him to. But the biggest question is, of course, Justin Fields. He's your guy. You traded up to get him. He is part of the last regime. And I've had this conversation with Bears fans of going, okay, how long do you give him? Do you give him this season and then another one, even if he's not that great this season? I feel like you still give him a shot because there's a lot of variables there. He doesn't have the best team around him. So in talking about what I see now with the Bears, wins and losses shouldn't even be a factor this year. It's, do we have our franchise QB? And if not, that's a whole different problem that we need to tackle. So I'm not necessarily surprised that you saw that discipline because Matt Nagy's not running the team anymore. You have KOC, who's great. Like, KOC, I'm so sorry. You have Eberflus, who comes from a defensive background. He's a disciplined guy, not really super duper flashy, but you don't need flashy. You need that discipline to say, hey, let's be at least a pain in the ass for a lot of these other teams for every single game that we play and see what we have, because then next year we can actually have the capital to start building upon it. So I'm not surprised. It's just, it's different because you had Matt Nagy for so long, in my opinion.
No, it's true. And it was stark of how different it was. And actually coming out and making adjustments. And you know what? They look like they were in shape. The 49ers, I know that they started showing some highlights, and the heavy stuff didn't come down to the very end. Yeah. And then I wanted everybody to know, that's not what the whole game looked like. Yeah. Trey Lance was missing open throws, and that's the thing. Everybody is looking at Trey Lance like, oh, you know what? We don't want to judge him on this one game. It was a monsoon. It was this. Oh, so many factors are going in, and then everybody looks at Justin like, nope, this guy can't play. He threw 2 touchdowns. Yeah. And I think that the most important thing for me is that, again, making those adjustments, setting them up. I thought that the way that the Bears attacked them was they were going to run the football. And as long as the 49ers didn't get a huge lead and didn't extend a huge lead, there was no pressure to go out there and really take too many chances and put you in a bad spot. So when they had their moment and the time was right, they went out there and made the plays. And I think the touchdown pass to Dante Pettis, he threw he lofted a ball to him because he didn't have, you don't throw don't overthrow him. Make sure he gets the football because it's going to be a huge gainer. I think things like that, the throw to Equanimeous St. Brown also was pretty nice. That was actually a nice throw. What'd you think? What'd you think when Equanimeous St. Brown was running into the end zone? And you're like, really? Now this is when this happened?
Now, here we go. It's funny, too, because I've talked to a bunch of players, too, especially ones that were on the practice squad, like Kurt, and you guys worked him out. And he was just like, listen, EQ can play. He just wants an opportunity. And that there was stuff that was going on and all that great stuff. But I think the fact that you mentioned it, even the fact that you made adjustments, that was different for the Chicago Bears. That's something that you hadn't really seen with the last regime. And I think that if you're anybody who is anybody in this business, if you're actually making conclusions off of Justin Fields or Trey Lance from that game, I don't know what we're doing besides clickbait here. Because if you're saying, oh, well, Trey Lance, we'll see, but Justin Fields, he looked real bad, or even vice versa.
I do the reverse. I do the reverse.
Yeah, I know. It was a typhoon. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that you can't look at them and go, yeah, they're busts, or oh my God, they're going to be amazing. I think there's things that you can take, like Justin Fields' resiliency, and say hey, he made some nice throws and he did enough to win the game. The defense was able to be good, etc. I think you look at this Sunday, that'll be a much better test and a more accurate gauge of being okay, let's see where he is in conditions that are not, you're sinking into the field.
Well, there's a 60% chance of rain. So again, if the Bears can just somehow manage to play in the rain the whole year, everybody can make excuses. Unfortunately, the Super Bowl's in Arizona, so
it is.
I don't know if we'll have to ask them to pull the roof open.
Yeah, just retract
something like that. Just retract it, just so it can rain, just so the Bears can have another excuse to go out and win. I think that they're set up pretty well. I like your breakdown of the division. The Lions, to me, I do like what you're saying about them because their offensive line is fantastic, and if they had any other quarterback, I would really be concerned about what they're going to do. And I think that no matter what happens this season, they have to jump up in the draft and take a quarterback. Because I think they'll be good enough to be like right in that like 10, 11 spot where like, not bad enough to get the number one quarterback, but
people were looking at it and going, oh, with their first pick this past draft, they're going to pick a quarterback. I'm like, no. I'm like, maybe the old Lions would have, but I'm like, if they do that, they just tanked their rebuild. They just tanked it. Because again, they're in another position. They should not even care about wins and loss. I think they're going to be like a really gritty, not to be a Hard Knocks guy, but like, they're going to be a gritty team this year. And it's not even about wins and losses again, because it's setting up for the next step. Because once that D-line, because I think that they have young talent there, you obviously have Hutch back there. Once that D-line and even some of their old draft picks that they drafted really, really high, like Okuda, if he's able to step up and make that secondary a little bit better, they're building a balanced football team. They have the running backs. So like now it's, hey, once you get that franchise guy, be careful, because like they're starting to build that team the correct way, finally.
But I'm just not as big of a believer in Dan Campbell as you are. Like, I like him, but to go back, he's kind of like Danhausen, where you're like, hey, I love seeing him. When he's on my television, I love it. I can't look away. But do I think that he's going to end up holding the AEW title? I don't. It's similarly, I want him to. I like him. He's one of my favorites. I'll buy his t-shirt. Dan Campbell, give me a t-shirt. Give me a Biting the Kneecap t-shirt. I'll wear it. No, I won't wear it, but I'll have the merch. That's what I feel like the Lions are good at. Like, Dad, you're the lovable, like, we're going to do a video package for you, and we're going to think that you could be good, but you're not Ryan Starks.
Let's just say, for example, let's say he's not the guy, right? The pieces that they have been making in the draft are so intentional. Like, not this past draft, but the draft before. Trenches, all trenches. That's how you build a good football team, right? It's like throughout the years, those are the positions that really matter. And then you had guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown who were able to emerge after that Vikings game, which was beautiful, right? Yeah. Loved everything about that. So you have these guys bit by bit by bit that could start making a difference. You get a QB back there. You got Jameson Williams. If he's able to come out and be like the guy that they think he can be, watch out for him too. I think they're just building it in a really, really smart way. So if Dan Campbell's the guy, they're set. Even if he's not, if they get a guy who could just be competent and not be Matt Patricia, I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, it is one of those situations that if it's not Dan Campbell, the next coach is going to love the team that he's inheriting. Yeah. It is disgusting, because that offensive line, like we were talking about that, like it's so legit.
Yep.
And it makes even the most obscene of quarterbacks like Jared Goff look better than they are. And so they're always going to be in it. They're always going to be there. But I think the game that they had on Sunday against the Eagles is like what we should expect from the Lions. Like, God, you played so great. Yeah. And I know we have a kid who's in the comments right now being like, oh, you guys are going 1-16. It's like, yeah, but you guys are victory lap. Like, he was coming on like, hey, it's week 1, calm down. I'm like, you guys are taking victory laps for a moral victory, not even a victory. So I think you need to calm down. So I like the way that sets up, but I don't know. When you talk about the Bears, though, and it again, like when people, I still feel like they're building it the right way, because they did put a lot of capital in the offensive line. We've seen it, and Tevin Jenkins, he pancaked Nick Bosa. He did some nice things. There was a rotation. They put Lucas Patrick out there to play some guard, but it was a nice rotation. Borum played well. Braxton Jones gave up a sack, but battled back. And, that's a good defensive line. So there's some growing pains going. They're developing that. The defense, though, like putting Justin, like when you talk about developing a quarterback, and you made the joke about paying Christian Kirk all that money. Yeah. Like, that is cool. That is fine. But it's like, is Christian Kirk, like, is he legitimately better than Equanimeous St. Brown or Dante Pettis or any of the, like, to me, it's like, you're not that much better.
I think he's better. He's not worth that much money, though. Like, there's no way on God's green earth that he's worth that much money. And like, that's what I'm saying. I was making the joke. The Bears shouldn't do that. Like,
no, I know. We're on board with that. No.
They should not do that. Like, again, if they're going to invest in anything, you invest on that line, right? Whether it's going to be the O-line or whether it's going to be the D-line or hell, get yourself a linebacker. I mean, that might be also your premium spot if, where you're going to be drafting. But I think that you at least have the luxury to go out and shop and say, okay, how do we solidify this? Even if we're not like, big spenders for like a big flashy signing, Let's get like these solid veterans that we can get there and plug them in some spots, and automatically we're going to be more competitive because of it. So they're just in a weird spot because like their defense, it's not as dominant as it was, right? Not in like the heyday of like you're looking at like the double doink. Like it wasn't like that. Not like that. There's people that are gone that have they're getting a little bit older. It's just happening because like when you guys had that, I was like, we talk about the Aaron Rodgers window. It was your defense window. I'm not saying it's closed, but I'm just saying that they're just in this weird transitional phase where like, are they an offensive team now? Are they a defensive team now? Are they kind of just like mostly defense and like running the ball, David Montgomery? That's what I mean. It's like trying to figure out what their identity is as a franchise right now.
Well, I think it's still going to be the defense because the first 2 picks that they used in the set, they didn't have a first rounder.
Yeah.
So they had 2 picks. They take Jaquan Brisker. It's already funny that Jaquan Brisker was the second guy selected, but the first guy that we think of. And they got Kyler Gordon. Jaquan Brisker was already out there making plays, nominated for Defensive Rookie of the Year or Rookie of
the Year already. Give it to him.
Already. But he was really good. And you could make the argument that he wasn't the best rookie defender on the team on Sunday because, of course, Dom Robinson went out there, a converted wide receiver that they drafted in the 5th round. They put him at defensive end. So they are getting younger, and they are just getting ball players. I mean, it looks bad. Like when there's somebody sitting in a pizza shop at Joe's Pizza in Wheeling who's like, Khalil Mack's not here, Akeem Hicks is not here. Name value, that part of it is gone. But like sometimes when you're in Costco and you're getting the Kirkland brand, you're like, oh, this is actually better. And I think that these guys will start becoming household names. So I think that I really love the approach that Ryan Poles has taken because it feels very deliberate. He didn't overspend. It could have been easy to placate us and be like, we're going to throw all this money at all these big name people. That's what Ryan Pace would have done. Right. So it's been a nice departure. And whether it works out or not, and that's a big thing, because I was making the point during the offseason that like, look at, you act like there's 4 new starters on the offensive line. So it's like, you can't say that they didn't address the offensive line, but like Brian Baldinger was like, you don't know that they're good. Like you made a change, but you don't know that they're good. And that's fair. I will say this, that we're a year behind like the Eagles. I think the Eagles are kind of like the model that I'm looking after when I'm thinking about how are the Bears going to get up to that point? Because you look at what the Eagles have done, with Jalen Hurts, because people still question Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
So you still have that. And then, but you have that they built a great offensive line, but they also built a solid roster. And they got to the point where this offseason, they are able to go after AJ Brown. Next year, I wouldn't overpay for Christian Kirk, but if there is a situation, and I know it won't be Justin Jefferson, but if there is somebody, you never know. Like it was a surprise. Let Justin Jefferson be the next guy who's like, I don't want to play here. Please, I want big money. Please. Minnesota, don't pay him. Pay all the money to Dalvin Cook. Give Dalvin Cook a 10-year extension, $1 billion guaranteed.
I'll give it to Kirk.
And Kirk.
Give it to Kirk. 84 mil is not enough.
You can find a Justin Jefferson anywhere, Minnesota. Get rid of him. Pay Dalvin Cook. And Alexander Madison. That's
the only solace that I take, because the only way that Justin Jefferson is going to hurt the Vikings is when he's going to get paid. That's the only time. Because and I knew it. I was like, as soon as he got drafted, I was like, crap.
Hated that pick.
Crap. Like we're not. It's going to be a problem.
Hated that pick that it was the Vikings.
Yeah.
Loved the play. Like, oh my God.
Dude, it's phenomenal.
That is one of the receipts that I have is my mock draft that I did that season, saying that if he goes to the right spot, he is going to lead all rookies in receiving. And that he was going to be a superstar. People were like, where was this at? I'm like, oh, this NFL.com column right here. So speaking of receipts, just so we can put it on the record, and before we get you out of here, we got to make the picks. Yeah. And I know, listen, we are who we are. Yeah. It's not going to be a surprise.
No.
But we got to get it on the record.
Got to get on the record.
For Tom Grossi, who's going to win on Sunday, and what is going to be the final score?
You know what? I know it's going to be a shock to many. I'm going to pick the Packers to win. It's I know.
Did you not watch the games last night?
I know. Listen, I know. I mean, listen, they lost last year and then went on a 7-game winning streak. I just have to keep on telling myself. But I think that you're going to see a good defense coming into Lambeau. I think a lot of it is going to be dependent on who's playing. Is Jenkins going to be back, a limited participant in practice? So is Bakhtiari, but then he was like limping still. And then Alan Lazard was also a limited participant in practice. If Jenkins plays, out of all those guys, I feel significantly better, and I think the Packers are able to get it done. I think you're going to see more of an investment in Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon on the ground to see just how successful they're going to be against that defensive line. And then I think that you're going to potentially see a lot more like moderate yard passing. The first pass of the season was that 75-yard bomb to Christian Watson, who unfortunately dropped it. I don't know if he's going to get that kind of trust for this week, but I think the Packers should do enough. I'd see like a 24-14 game. The thing that bothered me besides the secondary last week was Kirk Cousins just sat back there. I mean, like he could have had a brandy, he could have, pulled out the Coles cash there and counted it. He had a lot of time back there.
Yeah.
And so I want to see like Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith doing a bit more, but then looking at that D-line and see, Kenny Clark was causing some havoc last week, kind of against a young offensive line, seeing how much pressure that we can get on Justin Fields. I think that that's going to kind of really determine how successful the Packers are going to be, at least limiting, some of those big plays. Because Mooney can play.
He can play. So I agree with you. It's going to be a close contest. I have the Bears taking this one 21-20. I think the opportunity is right for a lot of the reasons that you listed. The Packers are banged up. The weather could be an issue. Yep. And if the Bears have to rely on all these like qualifiers to win, I will take that right now. It's like, whatever. Hey, listen, just get the wins. I think we're at that part of our rebuild right now. So hopefully Justin Fields is able to go out there and do that thing. So Tom, thank you so much as always. And I tell everybody, like, you obviously do a Packers show, but you need to be there. You do much more other things. Tell everybody how to find you.
Yeah. If you want to hear or see the person that's attached to this Muppet voice, you could just Google Tom Grossi on the YouTubes and you will find me. Yeah. It's going to be the biggest season ever. So looking forward to it. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
You do a tremendous job. We really do appreciate anytime you take a moment of that to spend with us. It is always cherished, but thank you so much. Good luck this weekend. And I know we'll be seeing you down the road. So have a great one.
Pleasure, buddy. Thank you for having me.
All right. There he goes. The great Tom Grossi. Make sure you're following him on all the socials. Legitimately, I told this to his face that he is a great follow. The joke was funny. It was a banger. Like, that's a funny joke. And outside of the Packers stuff, like even the Packers, it's worth listening to. He does a great job. One of the most entertaining guys on all of YouTube, regardless of the platform. But right now we want to turn our attention. By the way, I know that the Bears have also been saying some stuff that feels like sort of bulletin board material. And at some point in our lives, I want to be like not afraid of the Packers. Not afraid of like, I don't want to upset Aaron Rodgers. I don't want to do this. And I think the Bears are getting there. I think they're getting there and they have no fear. And I think that we're going to go out there and we're going to see a different team than we've seen over the last couple of years. So I'm excited for that game. And I am also excited right now because we're going to take a trip to the aisle, Fantasy Aisle.
Welcome to our Fantasy Island.
We've got a great guest for you today, but I want to remind you that, number one, listen, if your season is over, I think you can go to Underdog Fantasy and start all over again. That's right. We're going to be announcing a partnership, and Underdog Fantasy is one of the ones that I like to use. And I would implore anybody else who's out there, you're thinking like, my season's over. I drafted Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, and I'm stacking them up. Well, you know what? All that gets erased away. You just go sign up with Underdog Fantasy right now, and that can be changed. But our guest coming on today, I'm sure she's killing it in her fantasy league. She is one of the brightest minds in all of fantasy football. There are few people that I trust more than her. So please welcome back to the show our friend, Samantha Previti.
Hi. That was quite the intro.
Listen, it is a well-deserved intro. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for that. By the way, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I live in California, and we have all kinds of air quality issues. We have wildfires, dust, pollution from car emissions, COVID cases on the rise. That's why I got an air purifier. You live in Denver, Colorado. that rarefied air is so good. But I'm in California. I need an air purifier, which is why I went out and got one from Air Pura. And I put it in the house. It looks like a little R2-D2. I don't know if you're a Star Wars fan. Little R2-D2 running around the house. It looks amazing. So not all of us are blessed to live in Colorado like you, but if not, you can go out and get a quality air purifier from companies like Air Pura. And I got that pitch in, but how are you?
I might need that too. We've got wildfires. We've got thin air up here. So, people carry around oxygen and stuff, especially people from like sea level. It's an unforgiving landscape. I live in Breckenridge, actually. So I actually live at.
I don't want everybody to be able to find you. You got to do the why. Like I always say, like I'm in LA. Because you don't want people to be like, what's your street address? So like, I'm just trying to play it cool.
Fair enough. I mean, Breckenridge is big enough. It's fine. But yeah, I live at approximately 10,000 feet. So I'm always.
Oh my gosh.
When I went to LA, actually, I was like, wow, I feel like I can run a marathon.
Look at this. Yeah. Sprinting around.
Oxygen.
This is what it's like to breathe, which is why I'm glad I have the Air Pura. How are your fantasy teams, though? Talking about that. How did you do in week 1? You okay? How are we feeling?
I'm okay. I had a mixed bag. I will say, like, at least some of the duds were all on the same team. Like, I had a team that started out with Cam Akers, so that didn't do super well. And then I had, like, Cole Kmet or Darnell Mooney. I'm not sure which one on that team. And then like had Allen Robinson, maybe like a whole bunch of just like the guys, and like T. Higgins was on that team too. Not his fault, obviously. Leaves the game in the first quarter, but like, what can you do? And I had him stacked with Joe Burrow, and that league takes a lot off for like efficiency and interceptions and stuff like that. So I saw that like in normal scoring, he had over 20 fantasy points because I mean he did do a lot of throwing, but I think that he had like 7 fantasy points in this league. So it was one of those ones that it's almost so bad I want to like tape it to the fridge.
Yeah, you just, you know what? Sometimes you just got to flush that. I get a lot of lineups. Like people submit lineups and they're like, oh, I lost this week. What do I do? I'm like, well, you drafted good players. They're going to come through. Aaron Jones is going to be fine. Dalvin Cook's going to be fine. There's no reason to be concerned about that. But there are some places where you can draw some concern. And obviously with the injuries, including one to Dak Prescott, who is going to miss a couple. Well, depending on who you talk to, Dak Prescott himself thinks he could miss 2 months. Jerry Jones thinks he's going to miss a half. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm sorry, Dr. Jones. Apparently this isn't a significant injury. But for those of us playing fantasy football, if we drafted Dak Prescott, and what do we do on the waiver wire? I know it's a little bit late now, but maybe you missed out on picking somebody up. Who are some good quarterbacks that you can use to replace Dak Prescott this week?
Sure. So I just want to say that anything that Jerry Jones says, I just assume is cap. So I'm going to assume that like Dak Prescott has a better understanding of his type of recovery time than the owner of the Cowboys. But in terms of like guys you need to pick, I mean, first I would just cry. But second,
I've done that already.
Through the tears, it's like the stages of grieving. So after that first stage, you have to head to the waiver wire. Hopefully you did snag someone. There are a few guys that I was really targeting, and those were Jameis Winston and Carson Wentz would probably be the top ones that I was looking at. I mean, Jameis Winston has that back injury right now, but he is expected to go. I like the matchup this week. So, and he's like a type of guy that I think like season long, if he can stay healthy, he's like a top 12 type guy. I mean, he did get saved by that very monster fourth quarter, the first 3 quarters. Let's just like forget about that. But, but that's the thing, like his games are not always the easiest to watch.
No,
but
never.
It gets done. So I'm like, it's sometimes a little bit frustrating, but like at the end of the day, he had over 20 fantasy points. You're like, hey, I'm good with that. Carson Wentz, he had credit where credit was due. He had a really good game. He outperformed what I thought he would even do. Now, he's not going to play the Jaguars every week, but he does have a pretty soft schedule coming up. I mean, he plays Detroit this week. I don't think that they're necessarily as much of a cakewalk as they have been in previous years, but I was impressed with what I saw. I mean, 4 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, finished as the QB3 for fantasy. So those were 2 guys that at least before waivers ran were over 50% available in Yahoo leagues. So, I mean, they were out there. If you're in a deeper situation, or if you're in like a 2 QB league where you need to replace Dak. And I mean, I would maybe be looking at like guys like Baker Mayfield or I don't know. There's a number of guys.
There are a number of guys out there. You mentioned that
Marcus Mariota, maybe with the rushing, like that could be interesting. They're going to be a lot of games where they're behind a lot. So
yeah, he had 70 rushing yards. I mean, that's not insignificant. That's a touchdown, basically. So that translates. And of course, most fantasy leagues reward the running quarterbacks more than the traditional passers. What did you think of Trevor Lawrence? Did you get a chance to see much of his game? I thought that he looked good, and the fantasy point totals weren't, what I wanted them to be. But when I went back and watched the game, I was a little bit more encouraged. There were just a couple of plays that got called back, just missing Travis Etienne in the end zone. I'm like, he's close. How do we feel about him going up against the Colts?
Yeah, I actually really like a lot of the Jaguars this season because I think there's that like post-hype sleeper appeal to some of them, because I think there were these unrealistic, lofty expectations put on the Jaguars at like last year. They were this like 0 to hero type team, and people were like, oh, they're going to win 8 to 10 games. And obviously they did not do that. They were, and that's just a really difficult thing for teams to do. So I think, he looked pretty good, and they're going to be better than people expect at this point, but probably not great, but good enough. I mean, we've seen lots of quarterbacks, especially for fantasy, do well. And to your point about like the fantasy stat line maybe not being that great, I mean, there were a lot of guys this week that just like the fantasy points did not tell the whole story type thing. Like they're not going to tell you that, Travis Etienne had that drop or anything like that. So I have faith in the Jaguars. I think he is a very solid QB2 rest of season.
Yeah, I just can't bring myself to go after Carson Wentz. There's just something I don't know. Am I a bad person? I just don't feel like I want to, but I just can't do it.
Okay, so I think it's just like you have to be prepared to be hurt by him too, because like the range of outcomes for this guy is just so wide. Like I could see him going like QB3 like he did, and then I can also see him laying a bagel. So like it's tough to say. He's just, but yeah, like after a certain point when you're not getting Josh Allen off the waiver wire. So at some point, like you're just going to have inherent risk built into some of these guys. I'm just saying he's like one of the quote unquote best ones available if you're like a Dak manager and you really need someone to go out there. I mean, you really need someone in your QB spot.
Yeah, it is one of those things. I don't know if this is the proper comparison, but it feels very Ryan Fitzpatrick like that. Hey, huge game. We're like, you know what? Everybody, we're in. Like, there's no way this can go wrong. He's back. And then you start him and he goes out there and he throws like 4 interceptions. And you're like, what did I do? Maybe he should just go out there. I feel like if he went out and did something crazy, like dyed his beard black, like then maybe like be a little bit more heelish. Like he's almost too nice. Like he's a nice person, but it's like, you need an edge, Carson Wentz. Like go out there, get a black beard like Hogan when he was part of the NWO, and then just kind of like take that persona and see what he can do. And maybe that can translate. But before we
he needs to start dressing like Ryan Fitzpatrick at those press conferences, because that was his swag.
Yeah, get some Hawaiian shirts. You would look pretty sick. But we talked about Dak Prescott. And obviously, the impact is not just at the quarterback position. It does filter down to the wide receiver. I have way too many shares of CeeDee Lamb. I felt like I was talked into CeeDee Lamb during the offseason. I am sitting here not feeling great. What is your outlook for CeeDee Lamb with Cooper Rush as the quarterback?
Adam, I'm going to be honest, I'm pretty concerned. And the thing is that it's not just Cooper Rush. I am concerned because CeeDee Lamb did not look great when Dak was on the field. I mean, Dak played most of that game. CeeDee Lamb caught 2 passes on 11 targets. That's a 27% target share for 29 yards, finished as the wide receiver 75 in half PPR. So not a great time for CeeDee Lamb managers, obviously. I don't know if it's like the dynamic on the field because they got rid of Amari Cooper and now they have a whole bunch of like D-list type guys out there. No offense, but like guys that are just not going to draw a lot of coverage. And then he's going to get double teamed and he maybe just can't deal with that. Like he needs a complementary type piece. And I don't know, he just did not look great in that game. I don't want to overreact too much, but yeah, with the Cooper Rush thing, I will say the only saving grace here is that when Dak Prescott didn't play in 2020, when Andy Dalton had to pinch hit, CeeDee Lamb wasn't a complete flop. And all those guys were okay, not great. They're not as good as they would be with Dak. So I think like CeeDee Lamb in my head gets downgraded to a wide receiver 2 at this point, which is disappointing, but not like, oh, you got to just flat out sit him every week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that a lot of us can afford to sit him, even despite the downgrade at the quarterback spot. And you know, I go to the saving grace of Cooper Rush last year in the one game that he played. He did win, and he did pepper Amari Cooper with 14 targets. But then we saw last week, CeeDee Lamb had a bunch of targets, and it didn't translate. But we just got to sit there, hope for the best, keep hitting the waiver wire, look for guys like Kyle Phillips to put on your bench. Maybe someday we have to make that switch, but it's depressing. And again, for a guy that I didn't even want to draft, but I was sitting there with Matt Harmon's draft tiers, and even in the Yahoo drafts, this is why I play Underdog now, because Underdog wouldn't have led me astray like Yahoo did. I'm like, why did I listen? See, I didn't want him, and I got talked. This is why I got to like just drown out the noise during the off season, and another guy that I really loved during the off season, who I didn't get enough shares of, was Saquon Barkley. Is Saquon back?
I'm going to say he's back. Obviously, with the asterisk until he gets injured. I mean, he looked like Saquon, vintage Saquon from 2 years ago, put up nearly 200 yards of scrimmage on the Titans, finished as the RB1 in every format. I mean, you gotta he passes the eye test. He looks great. Right. So, and the thing is that, yeah, you can say he's injury prone, but every running back out there is being exposed to injuries at a higher rate than probably a lot of other positions. So it's not like, oh yeah, like him versus like Joe Mixon, he's not injury prone. I'm like, no, they're all kind of exposed to a certain degree of it. And, you know, Saquon Barkley, I think he just still has a lot of tread left on the tires there. So I think, yeah, there was trepidation about him going into the draft, but you know, not everyone, but a lot of people were all in on Christian McCaffrey. And it's like, if you were giving Christian McCaffrey the benefit of the doubt there, you probably had to give Saquon Barkley the same benefit of the doubt, because they've like kind of missed the same amount of time, maybe a little bit different types of injuries. But I mean, he looked great right out of the gate. So, I mean, he could be the RB2, RB1 for fantasy this year if he stays healthy.
Yeah, that is going to be one I feel like I regret not drafting CeeDee Lamb and not taking Saquon Barkley. And last year, you know what? Derrick Henry got hurt, and that guy's built like a brick outhouse, and he got hurt. Everybody gets hurt. Joe Mixon, as you mentioned, for a long time was injury prone. Last year, one of 4 players to have 1,500 scrimmage yards and 15 touchdowns. So you're injury prone until you're not. I love Saquon this year. Didn't like the situation with Eli Mitchell. I thought that was unfortunate that the injury wasn't even running the football on the play that he got injured on. Jeff Wilson Jr. seemed to be the hot pickup on the waiver wire. Is he the guy to have in San Francisco?
Oh, God. So first, like, even with Eli Mitchell, I already had trust issues with Kyle Shanahan. Like, it's obviously, it's not just unfounded. Everyone kind of feels the same way about the 49ers running backs. The correct answer, like which 49ers running back you want to have, is Deebo Samuel, obviously. Yeah. So everyone else is just vying for that number 2 spot. Now, that said, like, Jeff Wilson was pretty unremarkable in the game. I mean, Elijah Mitchell left pretty early, so there were definitely a lot of opportunities. Now, I get it. This game was like very weird, though. I mean, it would have lent itself more to rushing if you looked at it. But yeah, but I mean, I think that there were elements of it that were just kind of weird, and I don't want to take too much from it. He saw 9 carries for 22 yards, caught a couple of his targets for 8 yards. So yeah, like I said, not super head turning. I did not advise people to go out and like spend 100% of their fab on Jeff Wilson, because it's like, okay, yeah, we've seen this movie before, right? Have you not seen this movie before, where you're like, oh, I've got to go out and get JaMychal Hasty or whatever, and then like, because JaMychal Hasty had 20 carries in one game, and then the next game he's got 2 or he's
nothing.
benched.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that they're probably going to have to lean on some of the younger guys. Tyrion Davis-Price was the healthy scratch in that game. He may have to kind of step up. And I know there's another guy that was an undrafted free agent whose name is escaping me right now, but I think that they're kind of going to end up having to paste it together instead of like relying on one dude.
It doesn't matter what his name is. I don't even bother to learn their name. It's like my daughter with the LOL dolls. It's like once you bought one, it's like you have to buy all the rest of them. And that's the way it is with San Francisco running backs. It's like now you need every single one of them. I don't know why. I don't know how I ended up with Eli Mitchell in the first place. Now I've got a roster full of random 49er running backs, and I hate it. I should just cut bait and be like, I'm just going to – I know I can put Eli Mitchell on IR. I might just release him. Like, I don't want the headache.
Oh my God.
I'm done with it. I'll just take
I mean, it's always a roller coaster with the 49ers running backs. So I was disheartened because I knew that there were risks drafting Eli Mitchell going into the season. Obviously, he was a little banged up last year, and even regardless, Kyle Shanahan is mercurial at best, but him getting injured in the first game is just like brutal. You're just like, oh, why did I do this to myself?
I have nobody to blame but myself. Why did I get?
That's how I felt with my Bengals survivor pick. I was screaming at the television. Of course, I took the Bengals. How dumb is that? But
why? The Steelers beat the Bills last year. You know that MT is going to have his team ready for week 1, even if they end up winning 6 games. They're going to win. Oh, Sammy.
I mean, look, hold on. I'm not alone. There were a whole, I think the top 7 survivor picks, across whatever, a whole bunch of platforms, they all lost or something like that. The Titans were a really popular survivor pick, and they obviously got upset by the Giants. So, I mean, it was a really, really weird week out there. But yeah, I mean, I'm just watching. I'm like, oh, he's going to miss the kick. I know he's going to miss the kick.
Oh, of course.
He misses the kick.
There was no doubt.
And then I was Googling, do ties count? And of course, it doesn't even matter because they lost the game.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Thankfully my survivor pick of the Bears played off. So, no, I'm kidding. I'm not allowed to do survivor picks. So I don't think so. I can't do them for money. I don't, they make us do them and they're like, cool. Can I be in this? Or don't be in the pool. So I got to sit here and promote. Okay. I get out of that.
Insider trading. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's because you're just such a big shot, Adam.
You know what? That's it. That's exactly what it is.
Heavy as the crown.
Heavy as the crown. Exactly. Before we let you go, we do want to ask you, obviously waivers have been processed. Are there any guys that are still possibly available? Like if I got to go dumpster diving, once I get rid of Eli Mitchell, I'm going to free my life up because I'm going to be able to lose 4 49er running backs. Who are some of the guys that we could be looking at who could potentially pay off for you down the line?
Yeah, dumping Eli Mitchell, that's the equivalent of deleting your ex's contact information off your phone.
100%.
It's just cathartic. But yeah, no, I get it. I mean, a number of the popular ads, we talked about Carson Wentz, the pass catchers were pretty popular. Curtis Samuel went from 5 to 64% rostered overnight. Jahan Dotson, he's a guy that could still be available out there. He went from 23 to 40% rostered. Logan Thomas, I think, is still pretty available as well. So those 3 guys, especially with their matchup this week, could be worth rostering. In terms of even if you want to talk about this Thursday night game, I don't know when this comes out, but there's certainly some guys there like DeAndre Carter, who's still 8% rostered. He went from 1 to 8%. So he's going to be out there. Josh Palmer, he was, I think he played the most passing snaps of any of the players out there. So even though he didn't have the greatest fantasy game, Sterling Shepard actually looked pretty good. I mean, I hate to recommend Giants players that are not named Saquon Barkley, but he looks pretty good out there. And I think Wan'Dale Robinson is banged up. So could be a little bit more target share for him moving forward. And then, if you are the Eli Mitchell person and Rex Burkhead happens to be out there, I think he's not a sexy name, but Sexy Rexy could at least give us a few weeks, because I think Damien Pierce truthers were a little disappointed by his performance in week 1, honestly, I thought that was pretty predictable. I thought that like with the rookie sort of situation, like they were going to probably ease him into it. I don't think this is like some big thing where you should be dropping Damien Pierce or anything like that. I think you should have just expected this from the start. But in the interim, as they ease him in, Rex Burkhead might be the guy.
Yeah, I think for a 1 week pop, I think it's a pretty good idea to go out and get Rex Burkhead. And the Damien Pierce thing, this is why it was comfortable drafting him in the 13th round. Got a little dicey whenever they started drafting him in the 4th. It's like, I love Subway. But I'm not paying $50 for a foot long, which is basically what that turned out to be.
Exactly. And he was consensus ranked as a top 24 running back going into week 1, like for week 1. And I was like, that's a little aggressive. That's a lot of pressure to put on a guy that never had a full workload at Florida, all that stuff. So, I mean, it's like, it's a little unrealistic on a team that we don't think it's going to put on that many points. So I think like he'll do well, especially if you got him in, what would you say, the 11th round? But I don't know that he'll pay off if you get him in the 4th.
Yeah, your roster is going to look a little thin if you use the 4th round pick on him. If you use them in the 13th, that's probably a little bit more comfortable. But listen, Samantha, where can everybody find you on the internets?
Sure. Yeah. So I am on Green Dot Daily. That is Action Network's daily show. You can catch that on YouTube and Twitter and whatever. I'm also on the Fantasy Flex every Monday giving out waiver picks, and Convince Me every Sunday before the game, talking about start sit and injuries and everything like that. And then all my written work is on actionnetwork.com. All
right. And you can follow her on Twitter at Samantha NFL. Again, one of the rising voices in the fantasy community. We're very, very thankful when you take time to join us, and we appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. There she goes, the great Samantha Praviti. And what a great show it was today. Packers week is upon us. I can't wait. I think the Bears have an opportunity once again to shock the world. So keep those receipts. Keep cool, because I think good things are going to happen. Until next time, bear down. Sammy, go ahead and play us out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.